button just to make sure.
Mhm.
Okay, and then I'm gonna see if
Okay,
I can. Okay, we are recording, and I'm gonna see if I can pin you your screen so I don't pop up.
sure.
Okay, perfect. All right, just for our editors and folks at home, can you say and spell your first and last name for me and your title and who you were with?
Sure. My name is Jay Kaplan, Jaykaplan, and I am the staff attorney for the ACLU of Michigan's LGBTQ plus project.
Awesome, thank you very much. And today we are talking about a lawsuit that two parents alongside their attorneys are filing against Rockford schools. So I'm just hoping to get like your initial thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, I think it's going to be very important to see the response of the school district to hear their side of the story. But just I think a couple very important points that need to come out. First of all, parents certainly are an integral partner in their child's education with the school district. And whenever feasible, you want to encourage the school district to have open communication with parents about how their child is doing and what's going on in terms with their education. We also know that the courts have recognized parental autonomy, the right of decisions of the right of parents to make decisions concerning their children's upbringing, including their religious teachings and other things like that. Um, Parental autonomy, though, is not absolute. Um, and school districts also have a legal responsibility to ensure that all students, including transgender students, are in a safe and supportive learning environment. And we see situations in terms of where school districts, they have a duty to report if they suspect a child is being neglected or is being subject to abuse, to child protective services. I'm not saying that happened here, but I just want to make it clear that parental autonomy is not absolute in terms of what the school's responsibility. And the other thing we need to keep in mind is that children, even minors, have privacy rights. And the courts have recognized that there's a privacy right with regards to disclosure of their sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression. While we find, most parents loving and supportive of, they'll be supportive of their children if they come out. That's not the case for all youth. And in some instances where if you disclose without a student or child's consent, there could actually run a risk of harm to that child, physical abuse, physical violence. And we see that in statistics in terms of homelessness amongst LGBTQ youth. We also know that not all children are going to have the support of their parents if that information is shared. It's clear in the complaint that these parents, having a sincerely held religious belief, wouldn't necessarily be supportive of, or don't intend to be supportive of their child's gender identity. And so the school has to do a balancing test. And whether or not this disclosure is going to be harmful to that child. And I I hope to presume that that's what the school district did here. They wanted to ensure that this child felt safe and supportive in school. And uh, uh, if you have policies that have a mandate that school districts have to out kids without taking into account the harm that could come to some of those kids, school districts are opening themselves out for potential liability. So it has to be a very sensitive exploration with the student when they do come out and figuring out, is this something that they can share with their family? And if they're not able to share that with their family because of concerns of how this might negatively impact their health, both physical as well as mental health, school districts should have the ability to decide, okay, when a child is in school, we will refer to them based on their chosen name and pronouns. But at this point in time, it's not safe. It's not within the child's best interest to disclose this information to parents. Um, and I think this kind of case points out the need to identify more resources of support to families when a child does come out, so you can help families navigate questions and fears that they might have, or ways that they can best support kids. We know the statistics show that when a transgender child is supported by their family, their mental health outcomes increase dramatically. But when they're not supported, when they're forced to suppress who they are, this can have serious mental health consequences, including suicidal ideation, attempts at suicide, and sometimes kids ending up, unfortunately, taking their own lives because they don't get that support. So this is a situation that requires much more a nuanced discussion and a balancing of interest. It's just not carte blanche that anything that a parent says goes, if in fact some of those decisions might result in harm to that child. And once again, I hope to presume that the school district did that balancing test and decided that this could be harmful to that child. And in order to provide that safe and supporting learning environment, this is what they decided to do. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kayla.
Let me try that again. So sorry. Thank you for your thoughts and your background on that. It's important to discuss like the broad brush of it, because it's not, as simple as people may think. I'm wondering, in your experience, have you seen like suits being brought like this, like before, like district courts or elsewhere, maybe in Michigan or elsewhere? Like, I'm just wondering if you could provide context onto like what this could mean, you know?
Well, there was a lawsuit brought by a group of parents in an out of state district that had a policy saying that if a student comes forward and doesn't wish to have this information shared, you can't share that. There's a privacy interest, and a group of parents sued, saying that that violated their parental autonomy and their ability to instill, whatever the religious principles were. And in that situation, the case was dismissed because due to lack of standing, none of the parents who brought the lawsuit could demonstrate how this impacted them or with their own kids. This is a little bit different because you actually have parents talking about a specific situation. But often when these things happen, it's not a case where the school that, well, let's hide this from the parents. Let's lie or deceive the parents. That's not the motivation. It's often as a result of the discussion with the child and figuring out what's the best way that we can keep this child feeling safe and supported while in school. And eventually there might come a time, hopefully in situations like that, schools can work with these students to hopefully get them to a point where they might feel that they, you know, to a point where they can feel safe disclosing that information, maybe to family members, provided, hopefully those family members will be supportive.
Yeah. Um, do, I don't want you to, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but in your opinion, do you think that the judge might like take this case, and like what if the judge does, like what are the repercussions of that? Especially like in Michigan, like what do you foresee happening?
Well, I hope, hopefully all the facts and the information will come out about what happened here. I mean, I think the law is pretty clear. As I mentioned to you, certainly courts have recognized the right of parental autonomy, but that's not absolute. There are certain situations where, the government, uh, the compelling interest in looking out for the safety and welfare of a child, um, that takes precedence, over a situation like that. Our courts have recognized situations where disclosure of a child's sexual orientation or their gender identity has caused harm to them. There was a federal court case more than 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, where the police threatened to out a gay youth to his parents, and he ended up committing suicide. And the police department was found to be liable, for making those threats like that. And so, listen, we're going to see legal challenges like this. Um, I think there's certainly a lot of emotions on both sides, but I think it's important to talk this out and to look at the different interests that are there, and to always keep the focus on what's in the best interest of the child and and I believe that a school district that's doing all they can to ensure that a child is both safe and supportive while at school, and is examining what might be the ramifications if that information was shared at home. Um, I, I think they're within their legal rights to do so.
So it's my understanding that the Alliance Defending Freedom group filed this lawsuit on behalf of the parents. I'm sure you're familiar with them. I'm
Very,
wondering if you
very
can.
familiar.
Wonderful. I'm wondering if you can just like share like what they do, some context for me and like our reporters, and also for folks at home. Like, I mean, as far as it's my understanding, that this is not just like a law firm, local to West Michigan. Like these, if you
This
could
is a
share.
national legal organization, very well resourced, a conservative legal organization. And often when you find LGBTQ related cases involving the rights of LGBTQ individuals, there usually can be found on the opposite side, with regards to this. Now I believe that the rationale behind this particular challenge is the idea of parental rights and the idea to make decisions concerning the upbringing of your children and to instill religious beliefs. Once again, school districts recognizing that in any way that they can to encourage and foster communication, but there are some situations where disclosure of this information could be inherently harmful to that student, that child, and school districts should have the ability to balance those concerns.
Thank you for that. Jay, are there any questions that I didn't ask that you think I should have?
No, I think, any so in terms of I know they talk about there's guidance from the Michigan Department of Education with regards to in terms of a child sharing that information and about the disclosure, and I think that guidance is is right on, and it's the right approach, and I would hate to see any effort to adopt a policy or any law that would require the mandatory outing of LGBTQ students to their parents without a consideration of harm that could come to that student if that information was shared. Many times students look to adults at school that they can trust and that they can feel safe with, particularly LGBTQ students who encounter you know, bullying and harassment and rejection for who they are. And they're looking for that adult that they can trust. And any policy that would say, automatically we're going to share this with a parent, regardless of what might be the consequences of that, is going to force many young people to not be able to reach out. And like I said, there's many studies showing that when you don't have family support, uh, some serious mental health consequences and sad outcomes for LGBTQ youth. Transgender people, at least 40%, have considered suicide, or compared to cisgender students. So we know that when a young LGBTQ person is rejected or is marginalized, it can have negative consequences on their overall health and well-being.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, but I guess we will see more of these legal challenges, and but I think we'll trust the justice system to take what's required is a nuanced look and a balancing of the different interests, and keep the focus on what's in the best interest of the child.
Thank you so much for your time, Jay.